This is Tramp Scotty. It was a few years ago after the Daytona motorcycle rally that I was just hanging around Florida when I hit it off with a girl. She was 20 years younger than me. But the interesting thing about her, as she had ridden the rails, she lived as a full-time freight train hobo for 8 years of her life. And so maybe she was used to things being a little rougher than some. I mean, my world suited her really well. And we spent time together in, believe it or not, a beautiful abandoned trailer on a piece of land outside of town. It was a huge private place, man. We had our own lake, we had our own dock, we had our own boat, and we spent time traveling the state together. And at least by my standards, it was an outrageous adventure. And I wrote that story some time back, and it was originally published in Cycle Source magazine, but it is now in my website, which is a format that I can do anything I want with. So it has never before seen photos and some video, and tells the tale of what happened when a freight train hobo met a full-time motorcycle drifter and the adventures they had together. But right now what I have is a short video clip of Robby talking about her life on the rails, but it is really only a prelude to the actual story. And I'm going to leave a link to that story right below here, in the section right below here. And so here's Robby telling us a little of her life out there. Okay, we're here talking to Rebecca, who was a train hopper for many years. And this conversation's gotten fun because she's telling me about hopping trains. So I want to know about the grain trains, man.
The grain cars? Okay, so the grain
cars... Low
cars,
priority.
Yeah, low priority. Low priority trains don't have high priority cargo. It just depends on what they're hauling. You know, like I said, usually grain, junk, lumber. Sometimes they're just empty cars that need to go back to a different yard so they can be filled up with other stuff.
So you don't want to jump them?
No, because what happens is the trains, once you get off in the middle of major cities where there's major train yards, you only have one set of tracks, which means only one train can be on that track at any given time. And then every so often, sometimes, 100 miles apart, 150 miles, however far apart they are, they'll have what's called holding tracks. It's a little set of tracks that comes off the main track, like a little turnout, like when you're going to go usually like 5 or 6 miles worth of track. So they have to figure out if there's a train coming this way and a train coming this way, and they're going to fucking collide if one of them doesn't pull off into holding.
So the low priority trains get the holding. So you ever been stuck in the holding set area?
Oh fuck yeah, everybody has.
How long do you sit there for?
Sometimes fucking 6 or 7 hours. Because sometimes you're fucking hundreds of miles away from the nearest from wherever that train is coming from, but they got to pull you safely into the nearest holding track. But there's so few of them when you get to these, obscure areas out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, and you're telling me that you don't ride
junkers.
Oh, that's a junk train. That's what you guys call
them. Junkers.
How long did you ride the rails?
For like 8 years.
8. You tell me you got separated from your old man with the dog and everything, and had to meet up with him in New Orleans.
My little brother, my old man's best friend, my little brother's girlfriend at the time, sort of kind of wannabe girlfriend or whatever. She's the one who's from St. Augustine.
Keep it short.
But us and then 4 other people that we just kind of picked up along the way that all wanted to go to New Orleans. And half of us got on one train and half of us got on another train. And the second half, we never made it to New Orleans. Well, I think one person ultimately did.
Because you got arrested?
We got arrested. We got pulled off the train in Del Rio by a Border Patrol officer. Because we were down at what's called a 48. They have these gondolas. They're big metal gondolas, and they hold the box cars like you see the semi-trucks pulling behind them, those trailers.
Yeah.
If they're, those are oftentimes, some of them are attached, but some of them are if you look at them, you can see where it's just a box that's been set onto the axles, and then they're attached for transport. But those boxes, they come in just like the shipping containers that you see on boats. They're just like that. So they go into these big metal gondolas, and they call them 48s because they're 48 feet long. Some of them are actually 53 feet long. You can't ride in those, though. They don't have any bottom in them. It's just I-beams. So, if you try to hop one of those, you're going to be standing on I-beams for a long fucking time.
So
it's a good way to fall through and get run over.
There's no place to hide on an oil tanker.
No. In the grain cars, there's a little hole, like, because the way the grain cars, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
So you put grain cars with oil tankers because they're low priority, huh?
Usually, yeah. A lot of times
so you try to avoid those.
The grain cars, you'll see them, they're flat on top, and they kind of rounded on the sides coming toward you if you're looking at the like the lawn side as it's going by, and then they cut in like this.
Right, I've seen them.
In the middle, right.
Sure.
So if you notice, if you look closely at them, it cuts in, but then there's like a little flat metal piece that's welded on there. Well, that little flat metal piece, that, toward the center that's facing you, if you actually climb up on the platform of one of those, there's this hole where that metal piece covers up, and it goes into this little tiny cubby hole. It's not very big. It's just big enough that if you climb in, the hole's usually like this big. If you climb into that little crawl space area, it's about big enough where you can kind of, and it's angled, like inside. It's angled each way, so you can kind of lean back, put your feet up, fucking like, put your bottle or fucking whatever you're working on sewing or whatever right in your lap, and pretty much just ride like that for the duration.
So the rails run, what's a preferred train?
The hot shots.
How do you know those?
Because you look at what they're carrying and you look at how many engines they have, and if the engines are actually like where they're running. Sometimes they're just carrying extra engines and they're carrying deadheading, empty cargo, empty boxes. But if the engines are facing forward, those are engines that are actually being used. They're not just sitting there extras being towed along or being moved.
They put them backwards if they're not using them?
Yeah. Not always, but if they're backwards, they're definitely not being used. If they're facing the wrong way, yeah, then you know they're not being used. They're just being tugged along. Hot
shots. You look for hot shots. Now, how do you know?
Highest priority as far as cargo trains go is anything that's refrigerated. So when you see reefer units, they just like on the semi trucks, the reefer units, you can always tell them because they get that big refrigerated fucking fan thing at the end. And if they're double stacked, when they've got each gondola has two fucking boxes stacked, double stacks we call them, one on top of another. If it's carrying that much cargo, it's because somebody's paying good money to have that from point A to point B, and they want it there on time. Sometimes it's because it's perishable goods. Sometimes it's just because it's the highest bidder. But if it's got reefers on it, it's guaranteed to be a priority train because you got shit that's fucking goods perishable. It has to be there on time. And then when you see double stacks on there and you see 4 or 5 engines that are all facing forward and all actually running, you know that's a train that needs to get somewhere where it's going. Somebody's paying good money to have their cargo shipped. So that one's not going to get pulled over into holding as often.
I get it. So you, how do you know where the trains are going?
You don't.
Really? Well, how do you know if you're going to New Orleans? You were telling me the majority of the tracks run along the interstates.
Well, the thing is, like, what happens is a lot, yeah, they do. They follow major interstates. You'll be sitting and holding sometimes and watching cars go by, and there'll be other times when you're, like, in the middle of freaking orange groves or, like, just some fields where you can't see or even barely hear the cars because you're so far away, but they all pretty much follow.
How do you know which one to get on if you don't know where you're going?
You just go east or you go west. You gotta know the railroad tracks. You gotta know where they actually go, and then you gotta learn to look for the signs that they're either going to disconnect and move things. Usually stuff with like reefers and shit like that. If there's a bunch of shit on there, there's a lot of cargo, and it's obviously high priority cargo. It's probably got a distance. It's probably got a ways to go because it's not cheap to send the shit by the train versus over the roads. If they're sending it long distance, chances are they're probably going to be sending it on a train. Now, sometimes part of what's on a train will get disconnected from that train and left in one city, and then they'll either take the rest or they'll attach other stuff from that city that's going in the direction of wherever the rest of that cargo is going. So part of it is that you don't want to be on a train all the way at the back of the train, or on a car all the way at the back of the train. Because if anything's getting left behind between point A and point B, it's going to be somewhere further back there. Sometimes you can find a fucking engineer who's pretty cool. When you're sitting and holding, sometimes the engineers will get out, smoke a cigarette, whatever. They'll be walking around. Maybe they'll hear you in the 48. Sometimes they'll come out and they'll hear you fucking hooting and hollering. Because, a lot of times, we'd be drinking and fucking, and you're out there in the middle of nowhere and you think, who's going to hear you, And the trains are so damn noisy anyway. A lot of times they're fucking pretty cool about it. Oftentimes they'll ask if you got food and water, because they have water always stocked in the engineer cars, and they usually have snacks, food, whatever they bring with them, because these guys are on the trains for like fucking days and back home.
You ever have trouble with the bulls, as you call them?
The bulls are the ones you got to watch out for. That's the railroad police. They are a police department specifically for the fucking U.S. Railroad. And as of January 1st, 2008, it became felony to ride the trains, to be on the train yard on their property at all, because the U.S. government bought all the tracks and fucking...
All right, so since 2008,
they changed the laws and it's a felony now.
1998. I'm sorry. Did I say
98?
98.
98.
Yeah.
Since they changed. So
what are they? Because I remember.
So what happens? Do people actually get felonies for this?
Yeah, they can if they want to. The reason that they made it felony is because there's a lot of, I mean, obviously there's a lot of fucking high dollar cargo on some of these trains.
So do they really charge guys with felonies and take you to prison and all that crap?
Not usually if you're just there on the train, but they can threaten you with a felony. They can charge you with it and take you to jail while it all plays out.
You ever get any trouble with them?
I've never actually been ticketed for it. No, in Del Rio I did get a ticket actually, but after the guy pulled us off the train. He just told us to get off the train. He wasn't a railroad bull. He was a Border Patrol, you know, and the dude started to drive away, and we could have probably just got right back onto the same train we were on because we had a good hot shot. So we went out of the yard. The fucking bull told us where to find a Salvation Army food kitchen, whatever thing. We went.
Really?
Yeah. Some of them were cool, you know. So this bull was cool. He just ran our names, made sure nobody's like an axe murderer on the run, America's Most Wanted or whatever, and then he let us go, and he told us where to find food and shelter. You know. Well, we weren't interested.
You ever miss riding the rail?
Fuck yeah, I do. There's nothing like it. How long has it been? God, since I was like 23, 24, it's been like 10 or 11 years now.
Sounds like you still remember it well.
I do. It was a big part of my life for a long time.
Must have had some pretty big adventures going there.
Yes, we did.
You ever seen any real accidents? I've seen some people get hurt pretty good.
I've been lucky enough not. I've seen people get almost pulled underneath as they're running alongside it, trying to hop on. Or when they go to grab, you know, because when you're hopping on the fly, as we call it, while it's moving, when you run alongside it and you try to get on while it's moving, which is usually the best way to do it, because you can be just outside the train yard. So you got to make sure they don't see you, they don't think you're there. And it causes so much suction. Those wheels are huge. You know, there's like 3 sets of 2 on each car, you know, and they're like this big.
We've all seen them. Yeah.
It creates this weird suction, you know, like, so it fucking wants to pull you underneath. It's kind of like a little like mini like tornado type thing happening. And you can feel it. Like when you're running alongside it, it wants to like pull you right underneath those fucking wheels, man. It's kind of scary. And it's all good when you're running alongside it, you know, because the number 1 rule, any old train hopper will tell you there's 2 rules, and that's 2 numbers to remember, 5 and 2. 5 units or 5 engines and 2 bolts.
And 2 what?
2 bolts. If you're running alongside that train and you look over at one of those wheels and you can't clearly see 2 bolts, that means it's going faster than you can run, and you don't need to try to hop on it, because when you grab it, it's going to yank you and you're probably going to go.
Talking to Robby about riding trains. What I was asking is if you ever seen anybody get hurt. You see them get hurt more getting off the train, huh?
Yeah, I've seen them hurt themselves worse getting off the train. Getting off the train's kind of hard because, I mean, usually you're trying to get off before you actually go into the yard once you get to the city that you're going to. It's not like it's just like a, you know, like a highway where it's just paved and flat.
So you're trying to get off before.
Usually the tracks are up along, like there's like a ditch or a ravine or something. You know, the tracks are raised
so
up.
So it can be tricky to get off
the ground around you. And it's
usually going to die in a minute.
It's usually fucking dirt and gravel. So you're getting off. This thing's going like 15, 20 miles an hour. You want to jump, tuck, roll. You know, plus you got your pack fucking all weighted down with everything you've got and all your gear, you know. And it's, if you're smart, you'll throw that off first, you know. And then maybe keep a light one to fucking break your fall as you tuck and roll. It's really the best way to do it. A lot of people try to just jump and hit the ground running, and they always fuck themselves up when they do that. They usually twist an ankle, break a fucking leg, you know, dislocate a knee, and then go face first, you know, and tumble ass over tea kettle anyway.
Hey, I have to conclude this interview because I am running out of electricity on this here little battery on this idiot with the camera productions here again. So that's been our interview with Robby the train rider.